Hello and welcome. It's time for French Politics here on France 24. I'm Mark Perlman.
And I'm Molly Hall. Thanks for joining us. Here's what's coming up in today's show. Immigration is a key campaign issue. We see where the candidates stand.
And François Fillon lashes out at Emmanuel Macron, describing him as an avatar of François Hollande.
Plus, how to spot fake news and stop it from spreading. That's up next on the Political Brief.
Immigration has been a long-standing hot-button issue here in France. The wave of terrorist attacks carried out by Islamist groups, the migrant crisis, and a weak economy have only added fuel to the fire and made immigration a central campaign issue.
That's right, Mark. And we're going to see exactly now where the candidates stand on the matter. France 24's Simon Harding tells us.
Immigration, perhaps the most inflammatory topic of the 2017 presidential campaign.
The best way to send a signal, an honest signal that says we can no longer welcome you, is to cut off all the suction pumps of immigration, state medical care, access to social housing, and so on.
Do you think people think about that before coming?
Of course they do.
No, they don't.
Yes, they do, and we understand that. We understand that they want to come here. Sometimes in France, they can earn without working 5 times, 10 times more than they do working in their home countries.
Marine Le Pen and Conservative candidate Fillon want to cut benefits to immigrants, a move described by their opponents as a break from France's humanitarian tradition. The Front National candidate has also asked to cap legal immigration below 10,000 a year. François Fillon wants the number to be decided yearly by Parliament.
The economic and social situation in the country must lead us to control the access to our territory, and bearing in mind the current economic difficulties, that access must be as limited as possible. That is why I want a quota.
Both the leftist candidates and centrist newcomer Emmanuel Macron reject such measures.
If you look at it economically, socially, and as a principle, immigration is a luxury, no matter where it is.
Macron, however, remains vague about his intentions, except for his call to reinforce Frontex, the European Border Control Agency, in order to curb illegal entries. Le Pen's most controversial proposal is to stop granting birthright citizenship to the children of foreign nationals born in France. None of her rivals support such a measure, but she is convinced that being radical is music to the ears of her voters and will help propel her to the Élysée Palace.
Marine Le Pen's tough stance on immigration resonates with an increasing number of voters. For the first time ever, a far-right candidate is poised to lead after the first-round vote.
Yes, and she would most likely face off with centrist Emmanuel Macron. However, Molly, keep an eye on François Fillon. He's not out of the race yet. Either candidate would beat Marine Le Pen in the second round.
While Le Pen's level of support has been consistent, that's not quite the case for Emmanuel Macron. Voters are still wondering just who he is and what exactly he stands for.
Yes, and his conservative rival François Fillon says Macron is simply nothing but a continuation of the unpopular president, François Hollande.
Now it's official. The Socialist Party has a new candidate who has the support of the former Prime Minister. And surprise, it's not the candidate who won the Socialist primary election, but Emmanuel Macron, François Hollande's protégé.
Molly, let's just remind our viewers that Macron was brought to the presidential palace as an advisor by François Hollande. He then made him an economy minister. This is before Emmanuel Macron decided to run for president. And while it's true that several senior socialists, such as the former Prime Minister Manuel Valls, have thrown their support behind Macron, he is eager to show that he is a free man.
Yes, indeed, Mark. And just this past weekend, we saw Macron vividly respond to Fillon.
I said no, I left the government. I left public service to take a risk and launch my campaign with you because you were there and you wanted to. And who are the people lecturing me? Those who for the past 30 years have been immersed in politics, one of them who saw fit to remain Prime Minister for 5 years. And now they say, I had nothing to do with it. That wasn't my government.
Emmanuel Macron says he's not Hollande's heir apparent, but the man who technically is, socialist candidate Benoît Hamon, faces the prospect of a historical defeat.
That's true, Molly. The polls are very worrying for Benoît Hamon, who's desperate to revive his campaign, and he's calling on none other than Bernie Sanders to the rescue. Catherine Nicholson explains.
This here is what's left of an old Paris cobbled street leading into this gleaming new co-working space, which has been taken over by Benoît Hamon and his team as their campaign headquarters. It's an attractive fusion of old and new, but Benoît Hamon's own political fusion of old and new doesn't seem to be attracting the voters or his own Socialist Party. So, for the next couple of weeks of the campaign, this kind of thing is what they're banking on. They're going on tour all around France, around 100 cities in total, explaining this, his universal basic income, one of his key policy pledges. Now, that kind of grassroots support by motivated volunteers is the kind of thing that worked so well for Bernie Sanders to make him the surprise of the Democratic primary in the United States. And it's no coincidence that Benoît Hamon has been calling upon consultants who helped Bernie Sanders to give his campaign a bit of a vitamin shot. Whether it can work or not, though, that is, of course, anybody's guess. And at the moment, his poll numbers are sliding, and the main beneficiary seems to be his far-left rival, Jean-Luc Mélenchon.
That was Catherine Nicholson joining us there. Well, now we're going to talk fake news. And for more on that, we're joined by France 24's editor of The Observer's, Derek Thompson. Derek, now you've joined hands with several media outlets to try to respond to this fake news phenomenon that we've seen over the past few months. Now, this is called Crosscheck. Tell us more about this initiative.
That's right. The Observers are part of a small band of brothers, of fact-checkers in Paris and around the world. And we got together, we were looking at the American election very carefully, and we saw how fake news stories, like the famous story about the Pope endorsing Donald Trump, how they were getting more reactions on Facebook. That story got 1 million reactions on Facebook, and that was more than any legitimate news story got throughout the election cycle. So we got together to try to find out how we could avoid that happening here in France. So we came up with the site Crosscheck, and it allows us to pool our expertise and pool our resources. Our colleagues at Le Monde newspaper, for instance, they have a very useful list of sites that are known to be purveyors of fake news. So we pool resources with them. We at The Observers are experts in detecting fake images, photos and videos. So we pool our resources and we publish everything on the site Crosscheck.
Can you provide us with a very concrete example linked to the ongoing presidential campaign here in France?
Well, there was a story recently about Emmanuel Macron, and we first learned about it from a tweet by Marine Le Pen's niece, Marion Maréchal Le Pen. And she tweeted that 30% of Macron's campaign financing comes from Saudi Arabia. We demand transparency. Now, she had got the story from a site that looks a lot like Le Soir, which is the Belgian newspaper. And this site had a story that purported to be from the AFP, saying that Macron was getting some of his campaign financing from the Saudi royal family. Now, if you look closely at the site, you can see that the URL is lesoir.info, E-I-N-F-O, info, instead of lesoir.be for Belgium, which is the address of the real site. And it turns out that this site is what we call a cloned site. It looks exactly like Le Soir, but it's a fake site with a fake story dumped in the middle of it. Now, we don't know who did this or why they did it. All we know is that it's registered to an American called Donald Thomas in the state of Delaware. If he really exists, we don't know.
I know sometimes it's not only fake news, it's also just stories being taken out of context.
Yeah, that's something we've seen for actually a number of years now, especially images, photos and videos that purport to show migrants in Europe that are tweeted, that are posted by elements on the far right. We've seen that for a long time now. We're seeing a lot in this election campaign. And we have an example now that was posted by someone who calls himself Napoleon, and he tweets often anti-migrant messages, and he posted this video that he said shows a public hospital and a nurse being beaten up by a migrant who's come to get free healthcare. Barbaric, he calls it. So in the video you see this man violently shaking a nurse, and if you listen to it though, you can hear him shouting. and he's very clearly speaking Russian. He's saying words that I can't repeat in Russian. So this is a video that actually was a Russian man, a very drunk Russian man, who was assaulting Russian nurses in a Russian hospital, nothing to do with France, but it showed up on a French far-right website. This video was actually seen 15 million times on one Facebook page alone. And we find that people actually don't care whether it's authentic or not. People who like to tweet and share this kind of thing don't care whether it's authentic. There were people posting in the comments, this wasn't even in France, and people just ignored it.
Any advice?
Yes, go to the Observers, observers.france24.com. We have a list of tips on how to become better consumers of news online.
Thanks a lot, Derek, and thank you for watching this edition of The Political Brief.
Yes, we'll leave you now with images from the campaign trail. We'll see you next week.